Sometimes, the biggest mistake isn't breaking the law. It's deciding who you think deserves respect before you know who they really are. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the crowded parking lot outside a neighborhood grocery store in Norfolk, Virginia, where shopping carts rattled across the pavement and families loaded bags into pickup trucks before heading home for dinner. Harold Brooks, 72 years old with silver hair beneath a faded navy baseball cap, carefully lifted 2 grocery bags into the trunk of his aging dark blue SUV while his wife, Evelyn Brooks, adjusted the bouquet of white lilies they had just purchased after attending a memorial service at their church. They had followed the same Saturday routine for nearly 30 years, never drawing attention, never asking for more than an ordinary peaceful life. Harold closed the trunk with a gentle push and smiled at his wife. "Let's get home before this ice cream melts," he said quietly. Evelyn laughed softly, the familiar warmth in her voice carrying decades of shared memories. Before either of them could open the doors, flashing blue lights reflected across the polished paint of the SUV. A patrol cruiser rolled to a stop only a few feet away. Then another. The cheerful sounds of the parking lot faded into uneasy silence as nearby shoppers instinctively looked toward the growing scene. Officer Ryan Cooper stepped out first. Young, confident, and wearing mirrored sunglasses despite the lowering sun, he adjusted the radio clip to his shoulder before walking directly toward Harold with measured steps. His partner followed a few feet behind, without saying a word. "Sir," Cooper called firmly, "step away from the vehicle for a moment." Harold looked surprised but remained calm. "Of course, officer. Is something wrong?" Cooper didn't answer the question. His eyes slowly traveled across the old SUV, the church program resting on the dashboard, and the grocery bags visible through the rear window. "License and registration." Harold nodded politely. "Certainly. My wallet is in my back pocket, and the registration is inside the glove compartment. Keep your hands where I can see them." Cooper replied immediately, his tone noticeably colder. Evelyn exchanged a worried glance with her husband. "Officer," she asked gently, "did we accidentally violate a traffic rule?" Cooper ignored her completely. Around them, conversation stopped. A father loading bottled water into his pickup paused. 2 teenagers outside the supermarket lowered their voices. A delivery driver remained seated behind the wheel of his van, watching through the windshield. The tension spread quietly through the parking lot like a passing storm cloud. Harold slowly raised both hands chest high, his expression still respectful despite the confusion. "I'd just like to understand what's happening," he said calmly. Cooper took another step closer. "We'll ask the questions." The words landed with enough weight that even strangers several yards away shifted uncomfortably. Evelyn instinctively moved half a step closer to her husband. Her voice remained steady, but concern filled every syllable. "My husband has cooperated from the beginning." Cooper finally looked at her. "Ma'am, please stay back." Harold turned slightly toward his wife, offering the same reassuring smile that had carried their family through every difficult season. "It's all right," he whispered. "Everything will be cleared up." Neither of them noticed a heavy-set black man in a faded gray t-shirt parking an older pickup nearly 50 yards away across the lot, climbing out while balancing a paper bag beneath one arm, completely unaware that the ordinary Saturday afternoon he expected had already begun changing all of their lives. Harold kept both hands visible exactly where Officer Ryan Cooper had instructed, his breathing slow and steady despite the growing circle of curious strangers surrounding the parking spaces. Years earlier, he had learned that calm often spoke louder than fear. During 4 decades as an electrical technician, he had entered hundreds of homes, schools, and churches across southeastern Virginia, solving problems with patience instead of pride. That quiet discipline had become the foundation of his family. Evelyn rested one hand lightly against her purse, watching every movement with careful attention. She knew the expression on her husband's face better than anyone. It was the same composed look he wore when their son left for military training years ago, promising he would come home whenever duty allowed. Harold never liked worrying people. Even now, with uncertainty filling the warm evening air, he seemed more concerned about easing Evelyn's anxiety than defending himself. Officer Cooper glanced toward his patrol vehicle as another unit arrived, its lights reflecting across nearby storefront windows. The second officer stepped out, exchanged a brief nod with Cooper, then quietly observed the elderly couple without saying a word. "Sir," Cooper repeated, "I need you to answer a few questions." Harold nodded respectfully. "I will answer whatever I can, officer. We have nothing to hide." Cooper studied him for a long moment, almost as if searching for something that matched an assumption already formed in his mind. Around them, whispers spread through the parking lot. A grocery employee pushing a long row of shopping carts slowed to a stop. An elderly veteran wearing a United States Marine Corps cap folded his arms and continued watching from beside his pickup truck. A young mother quietly guided her children several yards away, not out of fear, but because she sensed something uncomfortable unfolding. Evelyn finally spoke again, her voice gentle but unwavering. "May I ask why we were stopped?" Cooper answered without looking at her. "We received information that matches this vehicle." Harold glanced briefly toward the faded blue SUV. The old truck had more than 180,000 miles on it, a cracked university bumper sticker, and a tiny wooden cross hanging from the rearview mirror. Nothing about it suggested urgency or danger. "If there has been a misunderstanding," Harold said calmly, "I am happy to cooperate until it is resolved." Cooper did not respond immediately. Instead, his attention shifted toward movement across the parking lot. The heavy-set man who had arrived moments earlier was now walking steadily in their direction, carrying only a brown paper grocery bag and a gallon of milk. His pace was unhurried, almost ordinary though he had not yet realized every nearby conversation had stopped. He looked like someone who had just finished a long workday, broad-shouldered beneath a plain gray t-shirt, comfortable sneakers tapping softly against the pavement. Several bystanders glanced toward him, then back at Harold and Evelyn, sensing a connection before anyone spoke a single word. The man noticed the flashing patrol lights first. Then he recognized the familiar blue SUV. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. He set the grocery bag carefully onto the hood of his old pickup, took one slow breath, and continued walking forward with remarkable composure. Neither officer paid much attention to him. To them, he appeared to be nothing more than another concerned family member approaching an inconvenient police stop. No one standing there could have imagined that within the next few minutes, nearly every assumption in that parking lot would be challenged in a way none of them would ever forget. The heavy-set man slowed to a stop a few yards away, his eyes moving first to his father's raised hands, then to his mother's worried expression. He did not rush forward or raise his voice. Instead, he quietly took in every detail: the patrol cars angled across the parking lot, the gathering crowd, the officers standing with practiced authority, and the growing silence that seemed to press against everyone watching. "Mom," he called gently. Evelyn turned, and the tension in her face softened for the first time. "Marcus," she whispered, relief washing over her voice. Harold managed a small smile. "Son, everything is all right. There has been a misunderstanding." Marcus Brooks nodded once without taking another step. His broad frame and relaxed posture made him appear almost ordinary, the kind of man people overlooked every day. His gray shirt showed faint traces of engine grease near one sleeve, and the grocery receipt still stuck out of the paper bag he had left on the hood of his pickup truck. Officer Ryan Cooper glanced toward him with only mild curiosity. "You know these people?" he asked. "They are my parents," Marcus answered calmly. "Is there a problem I can help clear up?" Cooper folded his arms. "This is an active investigation. Stay where you are." Marcus respected the instruction immediately. He kept both hands visible and maintained a measured distance. "Of course, officer. I simply want to understand what happened." The respectful reply seemed to surprise several people in the crowd. They had expected frustration or anger. Instead, Marcus spoke with remarkable restraint, his voice low, steady, and controlled. Harold looked toward his son with quiet pride. That calm had not appeared overnight. Ever since Marcus was a teenager, Harold had repeated the same lesson whenever life became difficult. Character is revealed when someone else loses theirs. Marcus had carried those words with him through every challenge of adulthood. Cooper watched him carefully, as though searching for a reason to doubt his composure. "How long have you been here?" the officer asked. "I arrived less than 5 minutes ago after finishing work." "Where do you work?" Marcus offered a faint smile. "I work for the government." Cooper raised an eyebrow. "Doing what?" Marcus paused briefly before answering. "Mostly training and consulting." It was true, although it revealed almost nothing. Cooper seemed unimpressed. Identification. Marcus slowly reached for his wallet only after clearly stating where it was. He handed over his driver's license without hesitation. Cooper glanced at it for barely a second before slipping it into one hand. Marcus Brooks, he read aloud. Same address. Marcus nodded politely. Yes, sir. Nearby, the elderly Marine veteran continued watching with growing concern. Something about Marcus reminded him of men he had known decades earlier. Not because of his size or appearance, but because of the discipline in his movements. Every gesture was deliberate. Every word carried quiet confidence without a trace of arrogance. The veteran narrowed his eyes, studying Marcus more closely as a familiar feeling settled in his mind. This was not how ordinary civilians carried themselves under pressure. Across the parking lot, the low rumble of powerful engines drifted through the warm Virginia air. Several dark vehicles turned onto the shopping center. Entrance rode in perfect formation, moving with calm precision instead of urgency. Most people barely noticed them. Marcus did. For the first time since arriving, his expression changed almost imperceptibly as his eyes followed the approaching convoy, and deep inside, he realized the quiet afternoon was about to become something no one standing there had expected. The dark vehicles rolled slowly through the entrance of the shopping center, their glossy black paint reflecting the fading sunlight as they moved with quiet precision instead of urgency. Few people paid them much attention. Most eyes remained fixed on the elderly couple and the officers standing beside the weathered blue sport utility vehicle. Marcus watched the convoy for only a brief moment before returning his full attention to his parents. Whatever had caught his eye, he chose not to mention it. His focus remained exactly where it belonged. Evelyn stepped slightly closer to her son, relief softening the tension around her eyes. Marcus, we are fine, she said gently. Please do not worry. He offered her the same reassuring smile Harold had given only moments earlier. I am not worried, Mom. I just want to make sure everyone gets home safely. Officer Ryan Cooper looked down at Marcus's identification once more before handing it back. You said you work for the government, he said. That could mean almost anything. Marcus accepted the license with a polite nod. Yes, sir. It usually does. Cooper waited for more. Nothing came. The answer was truthful, respectful, and impossible to challenge, yet it somehow left him dissatisfied. There was something unusual about the man standing in front of him. Marcus did not appear nervous. He did not argue. He did not volunteer unnecessary explanations. He simply answered each question directly, then fell silent. It was the kind of discipline that made experienced observers curious. The retired Marine veteran watching from across the parking lot quietly adjusted the brim of his cap. The more he observed Marcus, the more familiar the posture became. Feet balanced naturally, hands relaxed but ready, eyes constantly scanning without appearing distracted. Even the rhythm of his breathing remained perfectly controlled despite the obvious stress surrounding his family. The veteran quietly murmured to himself, "That is military." Nearby, a teenage grocery employee whispered to a coworker, "How can he stay that calm?" The older cashier standing beside him answered without taking her eyes off Marcus. Sometimes the strongest people are the quietest. Harold heard those words and smiled almost invisibly. He remembered a much younger Marcus standing on a Little League baseball field after losing the championship game. While other children cried, Marcus had walked over to congratulate the winning team before helping collect the equipment. On the drive home, Harold had asked why he seemed so calm. Marcus, only 12 years old at the time, had shrugged and answered, getting upset would not change the score. That simple maturity had only deepened with age. The engines of the approaching convoy became louder before fading again as the vehicles parked several rows away instead of pulling directly into the gathering. Their arrival appeared intentional but unhurried. A few people finally turned to look. Several men and women dressed in business attire stepped out first, speaking quietly into discreet communication devices. Nothing about them resembled ordinary shoppers. Officer Cooper noticed them as well, but quickly returned his attention to Marcus. "Do you know those people?" he asked. Marcus followed his gaze for less than a second before answering honestly. "I believe I recognize the vehicles." Cooper frowned. "Friends of yours?" Marcus paused. "Not exactly." Before Cooper could ask another question, one of the sharply dressed officials began walking across the parking lot with calm, confident steps. The conversations around the scene gradually faded until even the distant sounds of shopping carts seemed to disappear. The official's eyes never wandered toward the crowd. They remained fixed on Marcus Brooks alone, and for the first time that afternoon, even Officer Ryan Cooper sensed that whatever happened next was no longer under his control. The man in the dark suit crossed the parking lot without haste, his polished shoes making almost no sound against the warm pavement. Every movement reflected quiet confidence rather than urgency, and the people watching instinctively stepped aside to let him pass. Officer Ryan Cooper straightened his posture, uncertain whether he was looking at a federal investigator, a senior government official, or someone else entirely. The stranger stopped several feet from Marcus Brooks and studied him carefully before offering a respectful nod. "Good afternoon, sir," he said evenly. Marcus returned the nod. "Good afternoon." The exchange lasted only seconds, yet it carried a weight that no one else could explain. Harold noticed it immediately. Evelyn did as well. Neither of them interrupted. They had learned long ago that Marcus rarely revealed more about his work than absolutely necessary. The suited official turned briefly toward Officer Cooper. "Is there a problem here, officer?" Cooper answered professionally. "We are conducting a lawful investigation involving this vehicle." The official accepted the answer without challenge. "Understood." Then he looked back at Marcus. "Your meeting has been delayed. We have been trying to reach you for the last 20 minutes. Marcus reached into his pocket, removed a silent cell phone, and glanced at the dark screen. "It appears I missed the notifications." "That is understandable," the official replied, his eyes shifting briefly toward Harold and Evelyn. "Family comes first." Those 4 words lingered in the air longer than anyone expected. Several people in the crowd exchanged puzzled looks. The retired Marine veteran folded his arms tighter across his chest. His instincts told him this conversation carried far more meaning than appeared on the surface. Cooper, however, remained focused on the unanswered questions forming in his own mind. "Sir," he said to the official, "may I ask which agency you represent?" The man smiled politely but offered no direct answer. "I am here to escort Mr. Brooks when he is available." Cooper glanced back toward Marcus. "Escort him where?" Marcus answered before the official could speak. "To work." His voice remained calm, almost casual, but it was clear he had no intention of expanding further. Cooper exhaled slowly. Every answer seemed technically complete while revealing almost nothing. The uncertainty unsettled him more than open disagreement would have. Around them, the shopping center slowly returned to life. Cars rolled through the lanes. Automatic doors opened and closed as customers carried grocery bags toward their vehicles. Yet dozens of people continued watching from a respectful distance, sensing they were witnessing something unusual. Evelyn quietly reached for Harold's hand. "This has already taken too much of everyone's afternoon," she whispered. Harold nodded gently. The truth has a way of arriving on its own schedule. Marcus heard his father's words and smiled faintly. Those same words had guided him through years of difficult decisions. Never rush the truth. Never force respect. Let actions speak before titles ever do. At that very moment, another black sport utility vehicle entered the parking lot and stopped beside the first group. This one displayed discreet government plates that several people immediately recognized. 2 uniformed military officers stepped out, followed by a Navy captain whose crisp white uniform reflected the golden evening light. Conversations stopped again. Even Officer Cooper unconsciously lowered his voice. The captain scanned the parking lot only once before locking eyes with Marcus. His posture changed instantly. Without hesitation, he walked forward, stopped exactly 3 steps away, stood perfectly straight, and raised his hand in a flawless military salute. The silence that followed felt almost unreal, because everyone present suddenly understood that the quiet man in the faded gray shirt had never been ordinary at all. The Navy captain held his salute without the slightest hesitation, the white brim of his service cap catching the last golden rays of the Virginia sunset. Every conversation in the parking lot dissolved into complete silence. Officer Ryan Cooper stared at the scene, uncertain whether he had misunderstood what he was seeing. The captain finally spoke, his voice clear, respectful, and unmistakably formal. "Commander Marcus Brooks, sir. I apologize for the delay. Headquarters has been attempting to reach you regarding the briefing." Marcus returned the salute with effortless precision before lowering his hand. "Thank you, Captain." I had an unexpected family matter to resolve first. The captain glanced toward Harold and Evelyn with genuine warmth. I completely understand, sir. The words settled over the crowd like a gentle wave. The grocery employee who had been gathering shopping carts quietly stopped working. The retired Marine veteran slowly removed his cap and held it against his chest. His instincts had been right all along. He recognized the quiet confidence now. It was not confidence built on pride. It was confidence earned through years of discipline, sacrifice, and responsibility. Officer Cooper blinked several times before finding his voice. "Commander," he repeated almost under his breath. Marcus looked at him with the same calm expression he had maintained since arriving. "Yes, officer." There was no satisfaction in his voice. No trace of superiority. Only simple honesty. The captain reached into a leather portfolio and handed Marcus a sealed folder bearing an official government insignia. Marcus accepted it without opening it. The captain continued, "Your team has already assembled. They requested confirmation that you were safe after your communications went unanswered." Marcus nodded. "Please let them know I will arrive shortly." "Yes, sir." Around them, several of the government officials quietly stepped back, allowing the family a moment of privacy. They had clearly done this before. No one rushed Marcus. No one interrupted him. Harold looked at his son with gentle eyes filled not with surprise, but with quiet pride. "You never told us they greeted you like that," he said with a soft smile. Marcus chuckled. "You never asked." Evelyn reached out and adjusted the collar of Marcus's faded gray t-shirt exactly as she had done when he was a little boy heading off to school. "You still forget to straighten your shirt," she teased gently. Marcus laughed again, and for one brief moment, the commander disappeared, leaving only a devoted son standing beside his parents. The captain smiled respectfully, saying, "Nothing." He understood that some moments belonged to family alone. Officer Cooper watched the exchange in complete silence. Every assumption he had quietly formed during the past half hour unraveled before his eyes. The man he had viewed as an ordinary bystander had responded with patience instead of resentment, respect instead of confrontation, and restraint instead of anger. The lesson settled heavily upon him long before anyone spoke another word. The evening breeze drifted across the parking lot, carrying the scent of fresh rain from somewhere beyond the horizon. The flashing patrol lights still reflected across the blue sport utility vehicle, but somehow they no longer felt like the center of the story. The focus had shifted completely. It was no longer about authority. It was about character. And in that quiet moment, every person standing there could see which one carried the greater weight. Officer Ryan Cooper slowly removed his sunglasses, almost as though seeing the scene more clearly required nothing between his eyes and reality. The fading sunlight reflected across the lenses in his hand, while an uncomfortable silence settled over the parking lot. The Navy captain remained perfectly composed beside Marcus Brooks, waiting for further instructions instead of speaking out of turn. That quiet respect revealed more than any title ever could. Marcus looked first at his parents before turning back toward the officers. "Captain," he said calmly, "would you mind giving us a few more minutes?" "Of course, sir," the captain answered immediately. "Take all the time you need." Without another word, the captain stepped back with the rest of the government personnel, creating space instead of pressure. Their professionalism stood in sharp contrast to the tension that had filled the parking lot only minutes earlier. Harold noticed the difference and quietly smiled. "Respect is never demanded," he said softly. "It is recognized." Marcus glanced toward his father and nodded. "You taught me that before I ever wore a uniform." Evelyn gently brushed a speck of dust from Harold's sleeve, the simple gesture reminding everyone watching that this was not a family defined by titles or prestige. It was a family built on patience, dignity, and quiet love. Officer Cooper finally stepped forward. His voice sounded different now, stripped of the certainty that had marked every earlier question. "Commander Brooks," he began carefully, "I was not aware of your position." Marcus met his eyes without hesitation. "You were not supposed to be." Cooper lowered his gaze briefly. "I understand." Marcus remained calm. "The work I do is not important here today." Cooper looked confused. "It is not." Marcus slowly shook his head. "No, officer. What matters is that my parents deserve the same respect every family deserves before anyone knows their last name, their profession, or who their children are." Those words settled over the crowd with remarkable weight. No one interrupted. No one looked away. Even the breeze seemed to fade into the background as every person standing there reflected on the simple truth. The retired Marine veteran quietly smiled to himself. That sentence sounded exactly like something an experienced leader would say, not because it was rehearsed, but because it came from conviction instead of emotion. Cooper drew a slow breath before speaking again. You are right. The admission was almost quiet enough to disappear beneath the distant sounds of traffic, but everyone nearby heard it. Harold rested a reassuring hand on the younger officer's shoulder. Son, he said gently, every person has a chance to choose differently after learning something new. That is how good communities become stronger. Cooper looked at the elderly man with genuine surprise. He had expected frustration, perhaps even anger. Instead, he found grace. The realization seemed heavier than any criticism could have been. Marcus watched the exchange silently, pride filling his eyes not because of his own accomplishments, but because his parents continued teaching others exactly as they had taught him his entire life. The golden light slipped lower across the parking lot, stretching long shadows beneath every vehicle. In that quiet evening glow, uniforms, badges, and official titles suddenly felt much smaller than the character revealed by ordinary people when faced with an extraordinary moment. The parking lot slowly came back to life, but no one hurried away. People who had planned to be home for dinner remained quietly where they stood, as though they understood they had witnessed something far more important than an ordinary police stop. The evening air felt lighter now, carrying the distant sound of shopping carts and birds settling into nearby oak trees, yet the lesson lingering over the pavement was impossible to ignore. Officer Ryan Cooper took one careful step toward Harold Brooks. His voice carried none of the sharp confidence from earlier. Mr. Brooks, he said sincerely, I owe you and your wife an apology. Harold looked at him with kind eyes that had weathered decades of challenge without becoming hardened. He nodded gently, allowing the younger man to continue. I made assumptions before I understood the situation, Cooper admitted. I should have listened first. Harold smiled softly. Listening is usually where understanding begins. Evelyn reached for her husband's hand, her fingers naturally finding his after so many years together. She looked at Cooper with the warmth of someone who believed people could still grow. We all make mistakes, she said quietly. The important question is whether we learn from them. Marcus remained silent for a moment, watching the exchange unfold exactly as his parents had always taught him to handle difficult moments. Then he stepped forward. Officer, he said calmly, I appreciate your willingness to say those words. Not everyone does. Cooper nodded. I mean them. Marcus glanced toward the growing crowd before looking back at the officer. Then allow this day to become something useful instead of something painful. Cooper listened carefully. How? Marcus answered without hesitation. The next time you meet someone you do not know, begin with respect instead of suspicion. If you do that, you may never realize how many problems you prevented, but the families you meet will remember. Those words settled over the parking lot with remarkable quiet. The retired Marine veteran smiled proudly. The grocery employee lowered his phone, realizing he no longer wanted to record the moment. He simply wanted to remember it. Even the Navy captain remained respectfully silent, allowing Marcus's words to stand on their own. One of the government officials quietly approached the captain and handed him a small tablet. After reviewing it briefly, the captain walked back toward Marcus. Commander, he said in a measured voice, headquarters has postponed the briefing by 1 hour. They asked me to let you know there is no urgency. They understand you are exactly where you need to be. Marcus smiled gratefully. Please thank them for their understanding. The captain nodded. Already done, sir. Harold looked at his son with unmistakable pride. You always worried your work kept you away too much. Marcus chuckled softly. Maybe today reminded me why I do it. Evelyn reached up and gently straightened his collar once again. No matter where the Navy sends you, she said with a smile, you are still my little boy. Laughter quietly spread through the crowd, easing the final traces of tension. Even Officer Cooper smiled. It was a small smile, but an honest one. The flashing patrol lights were switched off one by one, leaving only the warm glow of the setting sun reflecting across the old blue sport utility vehicle. Somehow that weathered family truck now seemed more dignified than every government vehicle parked nearby, because everyone standing there understood that true honor had never depended on rank, uniforms, or authority. It had always lived inside the character people chose to show when no one expected it. The last rays of sunlight slipped behind the rooftops as the parking lot gradually returned to its ordinary rhythm. Engines started, shopping carts rolled toward their collection bays, and families climbed into their vehicles. Yet something invisible had changed in the hearts of many who had witnessed the afternoon unfold. Harold Brooks gently closed the trunk of the old blue sport utility vehicle once again, exactly as he had intended nearly an hour earlier. This time, however, he paused before opening the driver's door. He looked across the parking lot toward the people who had quietly remained until the very end. Some smiled. Others nodded with silent respect. A few simply placed a hand over their heart before leaving. Harold smiled back, not because he had won anything, but because understanding had replaced misunderstanding. Marcus stood beside his parents while the Navy captain waited patiently several yards away, never interrupting the family moment. Government officials remained near the black vehicles, speaking softly among themselves, allowing time to move at the pace that mattered most. Evelyn reached for Marcus's hand one last time. Even though he was now a decorated commander trusted with responsibilities few people could imagine, she still saw the little boy who used to run home with grass stains on his knees after neighborhood baseball games. "Do not work too hard," she said with a gentle smile. Marcus laughed quietly. "You have been telling me that for 20 years. And I plan to keep saying it," she replied. Harold placed one hand on his son's shoulder. "Your uniform may earn salutes, son, but your character earns trust. Never confuse the two." Marcus felt those words settle deep inside him. He had received medals, commendations, and confidential assignments throughout his career, yet nothing carried more weight than hearing his father say he was proud of the man he had become. "Everything good in me started at home," Marcus answered softly. Harold shook his head with a warm smile. "No, we showed you the door. You chose to walk through it every day." Nearby, Officer Ryan Cooper watched the family prepare to leave. Before they stepped into their vehicle, he walked over one final time. "Mr. Brooks, Mrs. Brooks, Commander Brooks." He paused for a moment before continuing. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to leave here wiser than I arrived." Marcus extended his hand. Cooper accepted it without hesitation. The handshake lasted only a moment, but it carried genuine respect on both sides. "Take care of the next family you meet," Marcus said. "They deserve your best before they earn your opinion." Cooper nodded. "I will remember that." The Navy captain glanced discreetly toward his watch before approaching. "Commander, we should depart." Marcus looked once more at his parents, embraced each of them warmly, then watched as Harold carefully backed the old blue sport utility vehicle out of its parking space. The faded truck rolled slowly toward the exit, its taillights glowing red beneath the deepening evening sky. Marcus remained standing until it disappeared beyond the shopping center entrance. Only then did he turn toward the waiting convoy. As the black vehicles quietly pulled away in the opposite direction, the parking lot became still once again. No applause echoed through the evening. No dramatic speeches filled the air. Only the soft whisper of the wind moved between the rows of parked cars, carrying with it a simple truth that lingered long after everyone had gone. Real strength is never measured by rank, appearance, or authority. It is measured by the kindness a person chooses when they have every reason to choose something else.